Greetings, Tony Mobley here. We are here with a new conversation with Tony Mobley. And guess what? This is episode 41. That's right, episode 41. Why are we here? We're here because life has provided me the opportunity to have real conversations with real people. First, I want to thank my guests from 2 weeks ago, Blair and Brian Anderson, for our conversation on March 16th. And I just want to take a real quick sharing with you guys that the reason why we didn't have a conversation last week is that my wife is having some health challenges and we could not be on last week. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of those who have sent prayers, well wishes. It is really appreciated. And she wanted me to make sure that we had conversations with Tony Mobley tonight. And I want to thank my special guest, Mr. Chris Fenwick, for being with me tonight. So, if you would like to ask questions, we have an opportunity for you to ask your questions on the Conversation with TonyMobley.com website, where we have the Mukana chat. On the Mukana chat, you have the opportunity to vote your questions up and down. And so we're going to allow you to do that. We hope that you will ask your questions in Mukana, but if you choose not to, you can ask your questions in YouTube. So thank you so much for watching tonight. And if you like this conversation and you like conversations that we are continuing to have, we ask that you set the bell to all notifications so that you can be reminded of all of the upcoming conversations. And so I am about to greet my guest, Mr. Chris Fenwick. Hello, Mr. Chris Fenwick. Who is Chris Fenwick?
I want to double check it. You can hear me, right?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
I'm just realizing I'm pushing a button that doesn't mute me in this vMix call. Anyway, so how you doing, Tony? Hope your wife is okay.
She's doing well. She had major surgery yesterday, and we have a little road ahead of us, but we're trusting the higher power to take care of us.
I'm glad to hear that. First of all, thanks for letting me do this, inviting me to participate. I think it was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 months ago, whatever. And you were having a conversation. There was a bunch of people like on after hours in the afternoon, I remember. And you just reminded me it was a Sunday. I wouldn't have remembered it was a Sunday, but I do remember it was a weekend, because when it's on the weekends, I'm 100 miles from a computer, and I know that I was in my garage, and we got to talking, and I think that conversation I think some of that conversation may have led to what this is right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's weird. Sometimes you got to watch what you say. You know, it can disrupt people's lives and cause a lot of upheaval. So I apologize to you, your family, your friends. I hope I wasn't responsible for this. But no, you asked who is Chris Fenwick. I'm a nearly 60-year-old guy in. I live in Northern California, reluctantly, and I like to tell people I produce video. I work on videos that are so bad people have to be paid to watch them. You know, so and what I mean by that is corporate video. So if you think about it, you know, the boss says, watch this, or it's going to be on this monitor in the elevator lobby, or, you know, it's literally, if people don't go to work or are told to watch these things by their boss, they'll never see them. So that's what I am. And I primarily, I'm an editor. Sometimes I direct. Occasionally, like right now, I'm working on a series of videos that I'm kind of producing and writing all the scripts to. But I produce corporate video, and I've done so for nearly 40 years. I realized just recently. I think next year I'll be able to say 40 years of video production under my belt.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, it's
Yeah.
less amazing when you watch all of the pages of the calendar keep going by and going by and going by, and you begin to realize how you get there. But it only happens one page at a time. Yeah.
Our next question is, what lessons have you learned from your parents that you're using today?
How much time you got? I will tell you, my father was an engineer. He was in the Navy. He got super sick. He nearly died. When he graduated, he went to college on the GI Bill, and in 4 years of college, my father completed 2 degrees in engineering, one in electrical engineering and one in mechanical engineering. He did this in the early 50s. And my mother was an artist, is an artist. My mother can sit in front of a blank piece of canvas and paint something that you want to hang on your wall. To me, that's an artist. An artist is somebody who makes something that you watch it or you listen to it and you go, I want to look at that longer. You know, like a photographer will take a picture that you want to see more from that person, whereas most of us just take pictures, right? A photographer takes photographs. So my father as the engineer and my mother as the artist, I like to think that I got the best of both of them, because my mother taught me how to see the beautiful aesthetics in the world in something as, you know, simple as a chair. I grew up in a house where when my mother was upset with us, she, you know, the joke about, you know, like if you have a bunch of brothers and sisters or whatever, and they want your parents want to yell at you and they start calling you every name but your name. They'll call you, you know, like Timothy, Jonathan, what's your name? Chris. My mom almost called us by the names of the different chairs in the house because she had this real love of mid-century modern architecture and furniture. And so by being surrounded by that, it gave me a certain artistic aesthetic. But my father would look at something and say, well, that'll never stand up on its own, or, you know, that's not going to be strong enough. So I definitely think that in our business, video production, you have all these tools that, you know, all these tools that you use to make things look good, but then you have to know what to do with them. You know, like why does one thing look better or work better or whatever. So I learned these things from my parents at a very early age, and I will never forget that. Super important.
What I heard you say, and if I'm wrong, then please correct me.
Sure.
You had the technical, the science, the structure, and the creative merge, and that was
Yeah,
your parents doing an amazing
absolutely.
thing. Yeah, that's powerful. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
We have a question from Brandon Bertram. I hope I'm saying that right. Indianapolis, Indiana. Can you tell us about the flag in your background? It looks handmade.
Well, Brandon, I don't know if that's a good thing that you say it's handmade or a bad thing. It is handmade. I will tell you at the beginning of the pandemic, I so my my wife and I have a complex life. We have an apartment in the San Francisco Bay Area because my wife's job, and prior to the pandemic, my job was in downtown Oakland. We like to say that we live in Sacramento. That's about 100 miles away. And during the pandemic, especially the first 6 months or so, we went home and we went to our house, and that's where we were. I still had to work, so I brought an edit system home with me. And but it gave me a lot more free time being at my house, and in my garage in my house is my workshop. And I had watched a video or something. I totally addicted to YouTube. And about somebody making a flag, and there's the U.S. flag, as you know, living in the U.S. in Indianapolis, has either 50, well, it has 50 stars. There are iterations of it, like the one that you see back there, that are commonly referred to as a Betsy Ross flag, and it has 13 stars. So I saw this video and I was like, well, I'm closer to my wood shop than I normally am, and I have some more free time. So I went down to Lowe's and I bought the wood, and I made one, and then I made another one, and then I made one for a friend, and I made one for my nephew, and I made one for this office. And I was just, it was very addictive. They're still fun. And it kind of, I kind of feel a little bit like Sheldon Cooper in The Big Bang Theory. You know, he has a web show that he calls Fun with Flags with Dr. Sheldon Cooper. And I realized that flags are fascinating, you know. And so I went to Texas a year ago, and I made a Texas flag because I'm going to Texas. So, and when you get into some of the design and the particulars and the layout of a flag, I will tell you this: when I got to Texas, I was annoyed that I would say probably 75 to 80% of the flags that I saw all over Texas were wrong. They're made wrong. The proportions are wrong. And if you go to make a Texas flag out of wood, you're going to learn about the proportions of it. And so it's quite fun. It's funny, annoying, whatever. Because you're like, ugh, I wish I could. Sometimes you just want to be able to see things for what they are. But I'm driving around Texas going, oh, that one's wrong. Oh, that one's wrong. Oh, that one's wrong. And it's a whole show to go into that. But yes, it is a handmade flag. I made it. I enjoy making them, and it's just fun.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Can you talk about what got you started as a video editor?
I would say being a control freak. When I was in high school, I had a teacher who encouraged me to help her make a slideshow for the graduating seniors. I think I was a sophomore at the time. And she knew I was intrigued with audio and video, well, pictures and sound, let's say. And she said, look, I'm going to take a bunch of photos. I want you to put them to music. And back then, long time ago, 70s, and available to me was almost no technology. So essentially, I had a carousel slide projector that I could advance the slide or not. And if I was really fancy, I could go backwards, but why? And then I could listen to music. So, right? So all I would do is I'd put the slides in the right order, and then I'd listen to the music, and I'd go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you know, and I'd click along to, and I remember thinking, and to be fair, I mean, there was technology in the 70s that you could pre-program that stuff, but I didn't have access to that. I was lucky to borrow a carousel slide projector. My father literally had one where we'd put one in and you push a little thing and it would push the last one out and with the new one. So I had to borrow a carousel slide projector. And I remember thinking when I was making that slideshow, and that was Joan McGrady Beach, who I owe a lot of my career to, seriously. She pushed me. She goes, make it as good as you can. And so I remember thinking, I wish I had a way to control exactly when the next image would come up. And I'll tell you, quite honestly, it took me years to figure out that, if I did it on video, I could. And I look at kids today who are, sitting there on their iPhone, sitting on their parents' couch, and if they're so inclined, opening up iMovie and playing, editing, it's like, or what they do in TikTok and stuff. It's like, I didn't have access to that, and if I did, it'd be a different world for me. But a lot of what I wanted to do, I had to wait for either technology to advance or become more accessible. And as it turns out, it was mostly accessibility. Like, I just didn't have access to things. So the question, how did I get involved in it? I wanted to control freak. When you saw the image exactly with the music. And so eventually I stumbled into this. Although I did about 10 plus years of live video production first. That's a whole nother story.
So let's talk about your first work in video production, and I guess by that the questioner wants to talk about your professional first work in video production.
Let's see. I think the first thing I ever got paid for. Okay, I'm going to be totally honest. Because it's an embarrassing story. Ron Polito was a friend of mine in college. Ron had a job. He worked at Radio Shack, and he took classes full time. So Ron had a little bit of extra cash, and he bought a video camera. Now, keep in mind, I'm talking about 1982. This was a big deal to have a video camera. People didn't have cell phones with cameras in them. People didn't have camcorders. The word camcorder had not been invented yet. This was 40 years ago. And so Ron had this camera, and he and I had this idea. Our school had this big talent show every year. And we had this idea, if we could videotape the talent show, we could sell copies of this thing, and we'd be rolling in fat cash, wow. Right? So what we did is first thing we did is we made a flyer, and we put it all over the campus. Like, hey, Spring Sing is coming up, and we're going to be selling videos. We pre-sold, I think, 100 copies of this thing. And at like $25 a piece or whatever, this is 40 years ago. We had like $2,500 in cash. I remember we were just going we were stupid happy with all this money. Now we just have to figure out how to do it. Okay. So Ron had a video camera, and we knew that this one guy, I won't say his name, his dad came every year, and his dad had a video camera. So we're like, oh, there we go. We got 2 cameras. This is going to be like Hollywood, right? And so Ron is like, they sell a box at Radio Shack that'll allow me to switch between these 2 cameras. And I'm like, really? That's awesome. Well, this box it could switch between 2 video sources, but it didn't do it well, right? It was literally, okay, like we had no idea what we were doing, Tony. I was that stupid. So 82, I was 20 years old, 19 years old. Just infinitely stupid that we thought we could get away with this. So, I mean, the equivalent would be, remember like Frankenstein, the big giant knife switch, like turn on the robot or turn on the monster. Like it was about that kind of technology. So switching between camera 1, cool, take camera 2, cool, take camera 1. So we watched this videotape back, and keep in mind, these are like bad VHS cameras, bad VHS recorder, and this horrible AB selector switch, which is not a video switcher, right? It's a selector switch. So stupid, had no idea what we were doing. And if anybody knows, that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And what happens is at every edit where you switch between one thing and another thing, the whole signal breaks up. And not only is it bad to watch, but it's essentially impossible to make a copy of it. Okay? It's impossible to make a copy of it. So, but we're sitting on $2,500 cash. So we had to make an announcement and refund everybody's money. And it was super embarrassing. And I think it was later that year I dropped out of school. Not directly because of that, but that didn't help, right? It didn't help. But I remember after that event happening, there was a basketball game happening at my college, and the local cable company came, and they had like a video production truck, which I had never set foot in. They had, and I remember walking up and standing on my toes so I could look in the door. And at eye level, there was a guy with a little tiny video production switcher. I want to say it's probably like a Panasonic or maybe a Sony or something like that. And I saw the 2 rows of buttons, the A bus and the B bus, the program and preview, and it had the physical, like the T bar, the fader bar, like they blew up the Death Star with in Star Wars. And immediately, like all of that made sense. Oh, you pick this one. I'm going to go to that one. I pull the fader bar, and like immediately in my head, I knew exactly what that thing was, even though nobody told me what that thing was. And that changed a whole bunch of choices in my life. At that point, I realized I couldn't use Radio Shack technology if I was going to do this and make money. But it was painful. It was like so painful. It was like so embarrassing to have to like, here's your $25 back, to like 120 people, I think ultimately ended up buying this thing or tried to buy it. So anyway, that I'll call that my first professional video job, even though it was a complete failure, but I learned immensely from the failures.
So let's talk about your most proud early professional moment. Just think about one moment in the early days that let you know, yeah, this is it.
So from there, from the failure of the talent show video, I ended up going, and this is a million steps, but I ended up at the College of San Mateo, which oddly enough is in San Mateo, California. And they had a really great hands-on video production course. And from there, you could wiggle your way into working in the college TV station for credits. And then if you worked enough hours in any given week, you could actually make a little bit of money. I think they paid like $5.50 an hour or $7 an hour or something. But you had to do, I don't know, like 6 or 8 hours a week for credits first, and then you could get paid. So it was basically slave labor. But we had clients that would come in and they were paying like near market value for the studio, and they were getting all this slave labor by all these students. And I remember after a while, it took a while, but there was one of the outside directors that these clients would bring in their own directors. And they figured, well, if we have a good director, they'll get these students over the hump and we'll get a good show out of them. And they did. And so there was a director named Catherine Russell, and she's, still active in the Bay Area. And I got a chance to cut a live show for Catherine. And I have a lot of respect for Catherine. She's a great director. She can call the hell out of a show. And I was super nervous. And we had gone through rehearsals, and these shows, they were, again, bad corporate video, but they were kind of news-based. So there was, boxes over the shoulder and lower thirds, and we'd have to roll a video and hit the tape on time. And these are in the days where to roll a video, like nowadays, you just push the button and it happens, right? I could push a button here and be playing a video in one beat. It'll take it and roll it and turn up the audio. Well, it took two people to do it, and you'd have to roll the video. I know the older people here know this, but some people don't. You'd have to roll the video 3 seconds before you wanted to see the video, because it took the tape machine 3 seconds to go, oh, I'm a videotape machine. I need to play a video. Let's get it up to speed, and boom. You know, it was like dinosaur technology. And so anyway, I was very nervous going into the show for Catherine. And this would be 35 years ago, probably more, something like that. And I remember getting up in the morning before the live show, and we'd done rehearsals the day before, and I stood in the shower, and on the tile wall in front of me, I imagined pressing every button I was going to have to press, like how to advance the still store and how to slide in the graphics. And, you know, what we do on these little ATEM switchers now took, you know, a couple $100,000 worth of gear and multiple devices that were spread out, you know, because you couldn't physically put the buttons close enough together. And I switched that whole show on the tile in my shower that morning. And then I went in, and as I recall, it went really, really well. It went well enough that Catherine would work with me again. Let's just put it that way. And she was super picky. Like she would chew up personnel pretty quick. He's horrible. I don't ever want to see him on my set again. Okay. You know, we'll find somebody else to run camera 4, you know? So, and as it turned out, I ended up doing a lot of work for Catherine, and she ended up taking me up to San Francisco. I worked on some big shows with her there as her AD for a while. So, yeah, that felt good. I hadn't thought of that.
And what's the
AD?
AD?
The question.
What's
Assistant
an AD
director
for those who don't?
Yeah, so in a control room across the front row, at least in the olden days, the director sat in the middle, and on one side you have your technical director, and they're pushing all the buttons. In other parts of the world, we call that person the vision mixer. And on the other side, you have your assistant director, your AD. And they basically just keep you honest. They're going to follow along on the script. They're going to, you know, make sure you don't miss things. So I went from being her technical director to her assistant director. And to be honest, I don't know why. I think the reason she did that is she wanted to get me some exposure in a larger market, but she knew that there was no way I was going to come in the engineering department. But she knew that if I could at least meet the people that I'd be working for, that I could, you know, transition from the assistant directors union, because I was like a whole different union, over into the engineering department. And as it turned out, it did work. It took a while, but I ended up getting in as an engineer at that station, which was not an insignificant hurdle to cross.
It sounds like she wanted to make sure that you were multifaceted as well, so that it made you a better producer, being
well, she liked laying
both.
Yeah, she liked yelling at me. I'll tell you that much. She was super hardcore. She taught me. She goes, look, you're going to need some stopwatches. She goes, and you need a back timer, you need a show timer, you need a segment timer. You need all of those, and they need to be sitting in front of you. You need to know how to use them. And like at any time in the show, she would just yell out, time out. Time out didn't mean stop, I want to take a break, I need to wipe my brow. Time out means I need to know how many minutes and seconds from where we are now until the end of this segment, and I need to know it faster than you can calculate it. Like, I want to know it right now. I need it now. You know, like, she was hardcore. But I tell you, I learned an immense amount from Catherine Russell, and I absolutely appreciate all that she shared with me.
It sounds like it.
Thank you
for sharing that.
How much time?
Aaron Husledge of Durham, North Carolina asks, do you think do you think the ease of editing these days has devalued the art of editing?
Um, I would say, Aaron, maybe. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do is to blame technology. But I think that any there's a guy that I work with, Steve Navrat. He likes to say there are editors and there are people that edit, and they're totally different people. There's a lot of people who edit, but they're not editors, right? They can sit at an application, which was, science fiction when I started, and they can click around and they can push things around and they can, make it look better. But they're not necessarily editors. And you kind of have to talk to editors it'd be really interesting to have a panel of, experienced, multi-decade editors. I don't want to talk to somebody that's been, I've been doing this for 10 years. I don't care. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm starting to be interested. I've been doing this for 3 decades. Okay, I want to talk to you, and get them to explain the difference of what an editor is and somebody who edits. So the tools make it much easier for the people who edit. It also makes it easier for editors. But there's a difference between somebody who's an editor and somebody who edits. So, and what I mean by that is, if you're an editor, you'll always have work. If you're just a person who edits, you might find your work drying up.
So you have a young teenager who's saying, Mr. Fenwick, I want to be an editor.
Yeah.
What do you say to them?
Are you sure? Are you sure? That's what I tell them. So I've had many friends over the years say, hey, my kid is really interested in doing what you do. Would you mind talking to him? I was like, are you sure? Because here's what I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them, don't go to college. It's a waste of money. Unless you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, college is a total waste of money. You're going to learn how to socialize. Oh, goody. You're going to learn how to drink. Oh, lovely. You're going to learn how to go to parties. That's not worth $120,000. It's stupid. And I also tell them, I said, look, if I talk to your kid and they do everything I tell them what to do, this is what's going to end up happening. They too will be 60 years old. They too will be a little bit bitter about some of life. They will have a house. They will be able to pay their bills, but they're not going to be working on anything that fancies their imagination very much. So like some people want to get into this because they want to be the next Quentin Tarantino or Steven Spielberg or George Lucas. Well, those jobs are already taken, right? So you can't stand in line there. Well, you can, but it's going to take a while. So that part of the industry, super difficult to get into, really hard to get into. And it might take you a long time to start to make a living at it. But if you do everything I tell you how to do, everything I tell you to do, you'll probably end up with a pretty comfortable career. You just won't be super... Nobody you know is going to want to watch what you work on. I'll just put it that way. Unless it's a rocket launch. That's another story.
Yeah, we're going to get to that story too. Can you talk about your work with the Fenwick frame? And before you answer that, I want you to know that there are at least 3 or 4 different Fenwick activities or items that are part of office hours. And I'm wondering, can you
call it branding.
Can you name all of them?
Yeah, well, my goal is to get the word Fenwick said as much as possible every single day on office hours. If it's not said multiple, and it doesn't matter if I'm there or not, I want my name said a lot. That's the whole goal. That's why I invented the Fenwick frame. That's why I invented the lower Fenwick, which I didn't actually name. No, that's exactly why. I want my name to be said as much as humanly possible. Don't kid yourself if you think I'm joking, because I'm not. I just need it said a
So
lot.
that's just two.
I'm working on the Fenwick backrest, the Fenwick footrest. Believe me, there's other things going on.
oh,
We're just getting started here. So
let's talk about.
So the Fenwick frame. So here's the thing. I am a big fan of what I call quantifying aesthetics. All right. So if you want to quantify why something looks good or why something looks bad, you can't just have, some hoity-toity art director look at it and go, oh, it's lovely. A little more this, a little less that, a few more serifs, a little bit more kerning, blah, 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 right? Like, art directors are some of the most annoying people. Some of them are very good friends of mine, but they know that they're annoying too. So the best way to get rid of the questions in production is if you can quantify the aesthetics. All right. So in office hours where you and I met, we started to get to a point where we were trying to make people look more unified. Okay. Now, if you've got 30 people who all have different cameras, different lenses, different opinions. Oh my goodness, that's the worst part. 30 different opinions. You're never going to get 30 people to agree on one thing. I'm sorry, was that my phone? Apologize. You're never going to get 30 people to agree on one thing. So I started looking into, well, first of all, I have decades of experience of framing people in a shot and making it look good to me. But I was wondering, well, what is it that looks good to me? Now, if you'll notice, you and I have about the similar amount of forehead and hair, but you take certain friends of ours, like say Jason Bache. Jason Bache has giant hair. Rupert has giant hair. So people were worried about headroom, and they were starting to get worried about, cutting their hair off. So they'd come in framed like this, so their giant hair wasn't out of the frame. Well, that's no good, because here's the thing. When I talk to somebody, I don't talk to their hair. I talk to their face, right? I'm looking at their eyes. And if you want to put two people, can we put up the two shot? If you want to put two people like you and I next to each other, ideally our eyes are at the same level. Now, any photographer worth their salt will tell you about the rule of thirds, where you divide the frame in thirds vertically and horizontally, and they'll tell you, you want to put stuff on those third lines. And when I was playing with the rule of thirds, I noticed that the frame that felt good to me, again, this is just my opinion, but my eyes landed on the third. My chin landed on the other third. And what that does is it leaves enough space. Can we drop in a lower third? Sorry guys, I'm directing. And lose the strap. Now, when you drop in a lower third, you have room for it. And if I was sitting lower and you put it in, can we put it in one more time? This is what we call chewing your graphics, like, because it's framed poorly, right? That's not attractive. Right. That's not pretty. So you needed to have that space. And when I realized the shot that I liked landed on on the rule of thirds, I was like, this is kind of worth documenting. So I started playing with it, and I just started putting it up. Excuse me, I hit my mic. I just started putting it up. And somebody said, oh, is this like the official thing? I go, no, it's not official. Just me playing around. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to acclimate Alex Lindsay to it, and not just say, Alex, I think we should use this. Because I don't know if you know this, but very few people get to tell Alex what to do. But I'll give you a hint. And Alex, I love you, but the best thing to do is to convince Alex that he came up with the idea. So I started using it, and then somebody mentioned it, and I said, well, I mean, do you like it, Alex? What do you think? He goes, yeah, yeah, I think so. I go, okay. And I let it go. And it probably was another couple weeks later when the idea of some sort of unified framing guide came up. And when Alex, agreed to it, it was like, they're going to be saying my name a lot more. Perfect. I win again. But anyway, there are a couple things about it. You'll also notice I have these little markers like right up here and here. Wait, there and there. That is a perfect square. So if by chance, like I think we're in a perfect square, aren't we? Oh no, I guess not quite exactly. But anyway, that's how this stupid graphic came about happening.
So let's talk about the lower Fenwick.
Oh, gee, okay. Hold on, let me get that one out. So the lower Fenwick you're referring to these in reverse order. The lower Fenwick came up first. I did not come up with his name, by the way. We all do the mic checks in the morning because Alex, rightfully so, knew that the content of Office Hours could be a podcast, an audio podcast. But when you cut between two people talking and one person sounds like this and the other person sounds like this, and then it's annoying. So he really wanted everybody to kind of work on their audio game and make everything sound more uniform and stuff like that. And so he started having everybody do a mic check. And what ended up happening is mic checks got silly. Like people were doing all kinds of just ridiculous silliness. I'll be honest, it was just embarrassing. And so somewhere along the line, somebody, probably Alex, said, look, let's make it uniform. Just talk about your audio chain. And I started thinking about it. I go, that's really kind of a cool thing, because how many places can you log on to a show on the internet and hear a whole bunch of different microphones, a whole bunch of different mixers, and kind of make a choice for yourself, like, oh, I like the way that guy sounds, or that guy sounds, or whatever. And I hate this phrase. I'll tell you, I hate this phrase, but I'm a visual person. I hate it when people say that to me when they come in to edit and then they're not. But anyway, I thought the idea of having the little icons across the bottom would make it easier to say, oh yeah, that microphone, that mixer, that computer. I also thought, like here, I have a little iMac here. In Office Hours, a lot of times you don't even know what kind of, if somebody is like a Windows-centric person or a Mac-centric person. So by putting the computer in there, you immediately go, oh, Fenwick, he's the Mac guy, whatever. So I made this thing, and then apparently somewhere along I was away for the weekend at my home with my family and my wife, and I came back, and I think it was Predator goes, yeah, he's calling it the lower Fenwick now. And I'm like, what? And I go, oh, really? Oh, okay. So I did not name it, but when I heard my name was being used more, I mean, I was all for it. So yeah, say Fenwick as much as possible. That's my goal.
Mike Emmett is in from Melbourne.
Hey, Mike.
Mike Emmett. Mike Emmett is in from Melbourne, Australia, and he says, picture this. You are in a truck calling a broadcast. You call out to a shot of a speaker, and you want to display that name. Do you call it for the
font or the lower third?
The font or the lower third.
Right. So, Mike, this is something. The question is either, are we talking about it in pre-production, or are we talking about how we actually call the show? So in pre-production, we're talking about the lower third. Calling a show, I typically just say, standby key it. But that is because I have pre-qualified the terminology that I'm going to use with my technical director and with the graphics operator. I think when we did the rocket show last week, talking to Tuomo, which was, you know, 2 RVs away from me, I think we settled on strap him, you know, and Tuomo knows who it is. I don't have to call for graphic number 17 or whatever. I don't have to say, stand by Tony's name key and strap him. I could just say, strap him. And Tuomo was just right on it. So, but I will say that when it comes to like calling shows, you need to have that terminology predetermined. And I told Doug, you know, look, I will always ready a take. I will always prepare a dissolve. And if I say prepare to take, if you take it, totally fine, because you did what I said. You can't read my mind. So I will ready a take, I will prepare a dissolve. And the third call, and this is really kind of leans back to the old days when you only had 2 color monitors in a control room. The other call would be preset. So preset 7. And all that means is I want to look at camera 7 on the preview monitor where it's bigger and in color. And I go, okay, ready to take, right? So I just wanted to see it. And Doug and I had the conversation before the show started. Do you want me to cut things on the preview bus before I take to it? I said, no, I don't care. I trust you. If I say ready 4 and take, 4 is going to pop up. And if I'm not liking the way it seems, then maybe we'll change it. We'll change that. But that is a conversation that you have between a director and a TD or a vision mixer. So it's definitely something you have to determine ahead of time.
So that is a conversation that's typically taking place during the rehearsals.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Clark Lopez Waterman, Astoria, New York. What is the best way to have a conversation with people you disagree with?
That's easy, Tlaloc. You talk louder and faster and with a bigger microphone. And I have found that the louder and faster that you talk, you'll probably win that conversation. No. So there's 2 types of things that you can discuss. You can discuss facts or you can discuss feelings. And if you disagree with somebody who has a different feeling than you, you have to accept that. But if I sit there and tell you, Tlaloc, this is a beautiful circle, and you say, no, it's not, it's a cube. And I say, no, it's not, I feel like it's a circle. Well, one of us is clearly wrong, right? And it doesn't matter what I feel if I'm wrong, because it's not a circle, because that's a quantifiable thing. This doesn't have anything to do with how I feel about this cube. And if you think that this cube is a circle or a sphere, I need to start showing you examples. You know, and I'll be honest with you, if you push it too hard, I'm done talking to you, because I don't know how to talk to people that don't know some basic geometry. But you determine whether things are feelings or are quantifiable. And if they're quantifiable and somebody's just plain wrong, the problem in our society is that we have told people that they can't be wrong, and that's wrong. Like, you don't let a child say 2 + 2 is 5 and say, okay, good try, Johnny. Okay, we'll call that 5. No, it's 4. It's always 4. It will always be 4. It's never gonna be 5. 2 + 2 is 4. And get over yourself. You're gonna have to deal with the fact that you're not good at math, and maybe math isn't the direction you need to go professionally, but you're wrong. You know, and the fact that we won't tell people that these days makes me pretty angry. 2 + 2 is 4. Done. Can we go to the next question, please?
Tlaloc, thank you so much for the question. Ray Franklin of Mount Dora, Florida. #Fenwick. Some technical people freelance successfully, but don't handle the business side of a gig work. Any suggestions?
Yeah, it's you, you're not alone, and it's not unique. It's very it's very common. I was going over some invoices that some people had sent me this last year, and there was this one kid. His invoice was invoice number one. I was like, okay, so he's kind of green. I mean, I'm literally getting the first invoice this guy had ever sent to anybody ever. It's not unusual to be bad at the business side. It is called show business. It's not show charity. It's not show. It's not show fun. It's show business. You have to learn something, and I would recommend the best thing that you could do is. Excuse me while I reach for something here. I'm reaching for my wallet. I'm leaning out of frame. Here's what you want to do, Ray. Find a friend who you trust that you could give them your wallet and say, take care of everything. Do what you need to do. And that friend is the person that you want to go into business with. And preferably that friend is really good at business. But that way you can do what you excel at, let them do what they excel at, be open to sharing ideas back and forth, be open to having the division between you be flexible and not unchangeable. But that's what you want to do. You want to find somebody that you could trust with your wallet and make that person your business partner. That's what I would do.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris, for that great answer. How did you get started with office hours?
Uh, Twitter. I think a couple days into office hours, like the 27th of March, a couple days ago, 2 years ago, I saw I think it was Alex's tweet or a retweet of his tweet about it. I was like, what is this thing? And I logged on, and I'd known Alex for several years, at least 15 years or so. I had a few times where we had crossed paths. I've always appreciated his views on technology. You know, one of the things that I've always kind of prided myself in is the ability to look toward the future, to understand what's coming next. And I like to say I'm looking over the fence. You know, the grass is always greener on the other side. I'm always looking over the fence. If you get stuck in this yard doing this thing with this equipment, this camera, and this editor, and this piece of software, and this phone, and this cable, whatever, what'll happen is the world will pass you by. And you'll wake up one day and you'll be completely irrelevant and you won't know what's going on. I have, for the last 30 years or so, really prided myself in looking over the fence to see what is coming up next, right? So like, oh, I should learn about editing on a computer instead of videotape. I should learn about these newfangled cameras. I should learn about HDMI. I should learn about the ATEM switcher. But I always saw that as looking over the fence to see what was coming up next. What I've learned from office hours is when I look over the fence, I would see what was coming next, but I'd also see another green lawn. And if I were to look forward enough, I'd look to the other side of that yard that I was looking over my fence into, and there was another fence. And looking over that fence on the other side of the yard that I was looking into would be Alex Lindsay. Because that guy's so far ahead of everybody that most people can't comprehend where his mind is and where he's thinking. I just have a huge amount of respect for Alex. So I always thought, like, oh, look at me, I'm looking over the fence. I'm looking over the fence into a yard that he's already been through, and he's looking over the next fence. I don't know if that analogy makes sense, but
it makes sense to me. Yeah. Okay. Can you summarize your use of different technologies for office hours experience? How has your setup evolved?
Uh, Reluctantly, I will say reluctantly, things have evolved. Uh, um, it, sometimes you don't know something is bad until you see something is good, right? And sometimes you don't know something sounds bad until you hear something that's good. The worst thing that you can do when you buy a new TV or a new stereo system or a new car is to go to a car lot and look at the next cars coming out, because you'll hate what you have. And so things have evolved slowly, just because I didn't want to just I'm kind of an anti-bandwagon person. Like, if everybody in the room is doing something, I might just leave the room, you know, because I don't want to just follow along. But, I do understand now uh, the advantages of having something like, a little switcher on the desk in front of me, so I can, cut between different angles and things like that quickly. I get it. And reluctantly, I was like, okay, fine. I guess I need this thing. Uh, Thanks, Alex. You've made me spend money, you know. So that's what I would say.
So can you show your setup?
Share it. Yeah. Uh, oh, I don't know, Tony. Is this really good television? I, what I do, I will tell you. What I do is the camera goes into an ATEM switcher. The ATEM switcher goes into the computer, but then the output of that switcher goes into um, OBS. And the reason I do that is because I'm a video editor. And the primary reason for everything that I do is so that I can edit videos with clients. And so if I want to show you my screen, I can, through OBS, just hit one button and you can see my whole screen. And OBS does that without running a bunch of extra cables. It just can lock onto my primary display or my secondary display. And locking onto the primary display is a big deal if it's an iMac, because it's not on a cable between one box and another thing. So I take the physical switcher, I run it through OBS, which is a digital switcher. I don't ask OBS to do a lot. I use it on a Mac. And everybody says, don't use OBS on a Mac. It doesn't work well. It's going to crash on you. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's really good. And then that goes into Zoom or whatever. What do we do? vMix that we're using today. So that's what
Yeah, we're using vMix Call. Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you. Brandon is back, and he says, what is the best place of AV gear you own? I'm sorry, best piece. I'm having trouble with my glasses tonight. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, no.
What is the worst piece of AV gear you own? What is the best? What is the worst?
Okay, so I would say the most valued piece of gear, which is kind of the best, is the MixPre with the noise assist, noise cancellation software, which is super, super huge. The worst piece of AV gear I've ever bought was, I could talk about this for an hour, but it was a tape deck that I bought like 25 years ago, and the retailer that sold it to me didn't support it well, and it never, ever worked to do what I needed it to do, which was to capture from FireWire, maybe 22, 23 years ago. It never worked right. And the retailer kept telling me the problem was mine. I had, in my opinion, irrefutable evidence of why it wasn't my problem and it was their problem. And it absolutely tainted me on that VAR, value added retailer, and I will never ever give them a penny of my money again. because of that situation. And I would tell you what it is in this very public forum, but it may be considered slander, so I won't do that. But off camera, I will tell you. But you won't run into these people because, frankly, I think they might be out of business. Gee, I wonder why.
Laura Thompson of Texas. What is the biggest light bulb moment you have had on office hours?
So if you're a panelist on office hours and you're in Alex's back-end system, the Mukana panel view, when Alex added the ability to not only digitally raise your hand, so like, oh, I know about this, I would like to talk about this, but I could see who he has chosen to speak and in what order he's going to call on those people. I realized that myself as a participant, I could be, if I so choose, and I wish more people would, I could be better at answering the question because I know who's coming before me. I know when I'm going to talk, so I can have my mic open right as he's saying, Chris, what's your opinion on this, whatever. And I could see who's talking after me. And I might purposely leave something out because I know, oh, Sky will mention that part of it. I don't have to, use all my words up on that. I thought he was going overboard with all the work that he had put into it until literally the first time I raised my hand. And it was just like, it blew my mind. Like how, really quickly I was like, oh, wow, this is so much better. And there's very few, again, talking about looking over the next fence, there's very few people that put as much time into the art of conversation that Alex has, and it's really astonishing. But I would say that would be the biggest aha moment, I think, was the question.
Thank you, Laura, for that great question. How has the world changed since COVID-19 for you and your company?
The world's in a lot of trouble. I'll say that. And I could talk about that for days. And it has nothing to do with COVID-19. It has everything to do with the way that we responded to it. It has everything to do with how there's this enormous lack of people actually listening to the facts that are in front of them. I could speak for volumes on that. What I've enjoyed is that COVID-19 has enabled the first step of many toward my own retirement. And the first step is I don't want to be tied to a physical location in order to continue working. I want to get out of the San Francisco Bay Area as soon as I possibly can. And COVID-19 has shown that that is a possibility. First step is to get to my house full time. And after that, my wife and my family and I, we can go anywhere. And I can slowly start to whittle away the number of days that I'm working versus living. And I had this conversation with some people last night. I said, the number one question that we all have to ask ourselves, young and old, are we working to live or living to work? For the record, working to live is the right answer. That's what you want to be able to say. And I don't know how many people can actually say that. Quite often we live to work, and that's not what you want to do.
Yeah. I hear you loud and clear. Brandon is back.
Whoops.
Okay, we've jumped to Dr. Clark. So we have a YouTube question from Dr. Clark. I
Okay.
recall that some time ago, Chris Fenwick mentioned that he was learning to fly fish. Chris, are you related to the
That's such
famous
an obscure
Fenwick?
question, Chris. Uh, one, I'm not learning how to fly fish. Two, I don't think I'm related to the Fenwick fishing rods. I wish I would because they, from what I understand, they're very good. I don't recall ever saying that or anything remotely like that, but I'm not related to the Fenwick fishing rods. Although I've always wanted to have a like a Fenwick tackle box because it'd be a nice little place to put your audio adapters and things like that. But I don't know if that company is even in existence or if it's been bought out by some other company. But interesting.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Brandon Bertram is back again. Professionally speaking, what would you consider to be your greatest accomplishment?
Um, I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, a producer that we in our local area all worked with and were very fond of. Uh, her name was Miss Jane. Everybody called her Miss Jane. Passed away, and she passed away in pre-production for her biggest show, one of her biggest shows of the year, of which I was going to be working on in a few weeks. And everybody that knew Jane was busy. We were all busy. We were super busy. And it took us about 5 or 6 weeks before we even had a moment that we could pause to remember Jane. And one of the, my friend Peter, who, a video producer who worked very closely with Jane, came to me and he says, I want to be able to put together some sort of a piece for Jane's memorial service. But what could we do? And you know, I've done memorial videos before, and you get everybody's photos, and you get some quotes, and you get a nice cut of music, and you know, somebody's going to have some behind the scenes video of that person. You know, and I've done these professionally. I've done these for people I didn't know. I've done them for friends of friends. But I knew Jane. I knew her very well. And so when Peter came to me, I was like, dude, we're all, first of all, when's the service? Oh, we don't have time. We're doing 17 other things before then. But I gave it a little bit of thought, and I said, I have an idea and it'll work, but it'll only work if we do it exactly the way I say. And he goes, what's your idea? So I said, when the people that knew and loved Jane the most arrive at her memorial service, we will pull them one at a time into a room off of the entrance. We'll throw them in front of a black limbo set, and we'll ask them 2 questions. Name one word that reminds you of Jane, and I can't remember the second question, but it was great. And I have a technique when I'm trying to get people to give brief answers. In one breath, answer this question. Okay. And so I sat within literally arm's reach of the camera operator. And as he would finish asking the next person those 2 questions, he would pull his card out of his camera and hand it to me. And I had this system where I would ingest from this pile, then I'd put cards over on this pile, and we just recycled them. And I had pre-cut a memorial video for Jane that had everything but the people talking in it. It had some graphics, it had some quotes, it had some a music and blah, blah, you know, whatever. And I knew it was going to be 4 minutes long or whatever it was, 3 minutes long. And so as people started to arrive at the service, we were pulling sound bites in. And I think locally I have a reputation for 2 types of edits. One would be what we call a fast turnaround. and the other would be very large scale, extreme resolution videos, videos that are 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 pixels wide. But the fast turnaround thing is a unique thing to kind of be known for. So before the end of the service, I had cut together the video that was gathered while people were arriving for the service. And we were very quick with people. They sat in front of the camera for maybe 45 seconds, maybe a minute, right? Just throw them up, say your bits, get out, next person. And I gotta say, it's in like the top 5 videos I've ever cut in my whole career, is this memorial that we did for Jane. It was meaningful. It's touching, I still get touched when I watch it. And it was fast. We turned it so quick. And by the way, the things that I said, I can do it if you allow me to do it my way. And my way was 1 breath per answer, 2 brief questions, and I have to have final cut. Like, if this goes into like some committee of, half a dozen people who have to approve on the final edit, it's not going to work. I get the final cut, and it will be good, and Jane would be proud of it, and it will play on time. You let one extra person get involved in like making those decisions, you're going to miss your deadline, right? Because that's the nature of producing, by committee. So I don't say that, to ride on, the memories of Jane, but it was I still look at it. It's a nice piece. It's a good piece. You can find it actually. Let me plug Jane's memorial video. How disgusting does that sound? But it's on my YouTube channel if you look for Miss Jane, Chris Fenwick, whatever. But it meant a lot. And I will also say Jane meant a lot to everybody. If you watch that video, you'll know how important she was to the local community here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, as you were talking about it, I imagine that there are people who would say that you are arrogant in order to, to take that position and to be that way. But
Tony,
as
that's one of the nicest things people have said about me.
But seriously, I would say that it's not arrogance, it's confidence. And a lot of times I think that we as professionals wrestle with the difference. And sometimes, if it is arrogance, that can get you into trouble. But thank you for sharing that story. That's really cool. But Chris, I see you as a very, very confident person. So again, thank you for sharing that.
I
Let's
think
talk
that's good,
about.
so I'll say thank you.
It is good.
Okay.
Let's talk about OH Space Vegas Rocket Project. How did you get involved in that? What's the story?
That's pretty easy. Preto was telling us the story. I was in Las Vegas for NAB last year, and Preto was working on his rocket, and I'll be honest, I didn't know this rocket thing was a thing. Honestly, like, really, grown men do this? Interesting. And I said, well, because he was going to shoot a rocket the week after we were there, and I said, well, send a live stream of it. He goes, it can't be done. Can't be done. I said, what do you mean it can't be done? You're not trying hard enough. He goes, it can't be done. And so a bunch of us got to talking about it. It's like, first of all, I don't really like the idea of can't be done. I think there's a way to do everything if you put enough effort behind it. And we just decided that we wanted to put enough effort behind it.
So I want to be clear. You're saying John Preto said it couldn't be done.
John Preto said it can't be done. There's no signal on the lake. You'll never get a signal off the lake. Oh, never? Can't? Come on. I like those odds. So a bunch of us got together, and smarter people than me figured out how to do the technical part of it to get the internet off of the lake. Not an insignificant problem. And then Sky and I got to talking about, well, if we were going to do this, what are we going to do? Just like sit around and wait for the thing to go off and then tilt up and be done? It's like, no, let's tell the story about all the people that wanted to be a part of it. And that was really the most interesting thing. I think John even said it best, that it's not about a rocket. It's about a community of people that came together to do something that was really hard. And part of it was shooting off the rocket. But frankly, I think even John would tell you that might be the easiest part of what we did that week out in the desert. The hard part was putting together a show that was, palatable and watchable and entertaining. And it wasn't an insignificant lift to do it, but so many people came and gave so much of themselves and so much of their time that it made for it was what you'd call like a mountaintop experience, but it was a dry lake bed experience. Like you can't understand it until you've done it, until you've been like that dirty and that thirsty, and it was I will tell you, it was absolutely horrible conditions. Right? So like when the wind would kick up, like it's just dreadful. But it was amazing to watch all these like really gifted craftsmen and engineers come together and put everything together. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. Like no questions asked.
It was indeed a powerful moment for me to watch. And even when I had the conversation with John, yes.
Oh, cool.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I watched it live. And it was really a powerful moment. So, and as you say, it was really, the rocket launch was cool, but it was all of the engagement, all of seeing people walking around and, cutting to this person, and then they were doing this, and then the ignition didn't initially work at first, and then you guys had to go back out there and then reset the fuse, and
it was brilliant that we came up with that idea to make it not work at first, and then have all that extra tension, wasn't it? It was. I got to say, that was my idea. I'll take the credit for that. No, that was like God just giving you flowers on a platter. It's like, come on, this is too good. It just made for such a fun story to tell.
Now, I will say you guys left me hanging because I was like, let's see the recovery.
Yeah, we owe you a recovery video. That'll come. We thought that would be easier to put together than it is, but that'll happen. That there will be a recovery video.
All right, very cool.
That's all I'll say.
Okay, Mickey Macature from the Philippines asks, talk about words just and should.
Mickey knows me too well. There's two words that I have a problem with, and those are them, just and should. When you use the word just with, especially somebody who's doing you a favor, it's like, hey, can we just put a deck out here over this? It was like, whoa. Just makes it sound like it should, there's the other word, be really simple, right? Because it's kind of, have you ever heard the term neuro-linguistic programming, NLP? To me, neuro-linguistic programming, so neuro-linguistic programming is the art of using language to influence people without them realizing they're being influenced.
Okay? Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'll give you my favorite example of NLP. One word, clearly. Okay? So if I say to you, Tony, clearly the Heil PR40 is the best mic ever made. What am I doing? One, I'm exercising a certain amount of authority because I'm speaking with authority about what the best mic ever made is. But at which I am elevating my own importance in this conversation because I have said clearly. So, I must know something. But here's the thing. If you don't know it, I'm actually taking your importance in the conversation and pushing you down. I am reminding you that you are less intelligent than me because I said it clearly is. And if you did not know that it is, then you don't know something that to me is very clear. Neurolinguistic programming, by using that one word in a conversation, I not only elevate myself, but I push you down, which is really an insidious thing to do to somebody when you're trying to, be in a relationship with somebody. But that the idea of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, that word clearly has an interesting amount of power behind it, right? And
Right.
think about it. Imagine, try it this week. Oh, clearly peanut butter and jelly is the best sandwich ever made. You're claiming that you know something, and you're reminding me that I don't, just by uttering that one word. So just is like that as well. When I say, the question went away. What are the words? Just and should. Yeah, so
Just and should.
But by saying just, well, just take all those clips and recolorize them and adjust the audio levels. Well, what I'm doing by saying that is I'm implying that it should be very easy because it's just making a few adjustments, right? And so I have actually said to people in edit suites back in the old days, in the before times, Carmi, miss you, when producers would sit behind me, I'd say, you can't use the word just in this room. I don't allow the word just. You can say the same thing, but you need to say it without using that word. Because I personally find it to be kind of condescending. Well, can't you just do this? Like, whoa. You're actually asking me to do a lot of stuff, and putting the word just in front of it doesn't make it less stuff, right? So don't use that word. and the word should is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget that, Chris. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Try the word clearly.
Josh,
try it.
Clearly, Josh Kaufman. Hey, Josh. Josh Kaufman asks from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, what is the mistake that many people make when trying to tell a story with a conversation or through art?
I think the biggest mistake people make is that they're uncomfortable with silence and they're uncomfortable with time. Time and silence are part of the story. They create tension. They create backstory. They create context. Too many people are too quick to jump to the end of the joke or the end of the story because that's the part they remember. But what you don't remember is all the steps getting up to it. And the steps getting up to it are priceless. They make the end better, but they get skipped over a lot.
Very cool. Vienna, our medical doctor and one of the hosts of the OH Space Project. She says, you were instrumental part of the OH Space Project. Can you describe what it was like to coordinate a large group of passionate volunteers who have become your friends?
Vienna, it's super hard because in a professional world, I'm just used to telling people what to do. Do this, don't do that, move, and I need it faster and quicker. And when you're working with the volunteers, you can't do that. Also, I found that working with friends is difficult because there has to be, there doesn't have to be, but with me, maybe there has to be a certain, I'm going to call it a suspension of decorum. I might be very rude to you, I might be very terse with you. I might be very demanding of you at this moment. But it doesn't mean that you're not still my friend. It doesn't mean that I still don't love you. But right now, I need you to do this, and I need you to do it without question and without asking why, and just get it done. And I need it now. And actually, I've explained it too long because I needed it back then. So doing that with friends is really difficult. It's much easier to work with people that you hire because you can fire them. And at the end of this, you're still going to be my friend. So I don't get to fire you, which means it's just harder. And I think that's the most difficult thing about working with volunteers in general, but also dealing with friends. Sometimes you just have to get stuff done now, and explaining, I don't have time to do all the NLP, if you will, all the explanations of why. I just need you to do it. And can we just get it done because we're running out of time?
Vian is back, and she says, how did you get your sense of humor? How do people normally respond to it?
I don't know what you're talking about, Vienna. That doesn't make any sense to me. I've always enjoyed listening to comedians and comedic craftsmen. There are some people that are naturally funny. My wife is hysterical. And then there are people that you can teach to be funny. I think the real magic is when you take somebody who's naturally funny and you hone their craft, because they don't see it as a craft. I used to work for a guy named Frank Zamacona, and he produced a television show in the 80s called Comedy Tonight. It was all over the country in the United States. And Frank knew every comedian in the San Francisco area, or every comedian that ever played in the San Francisco area, which means he knew every comedian. And he taught me a lot about some of the craft of comedy. How do people respond to it? I think they get annoyed by it because a lot of times it seems like I'm not taking things seriously, because comedy can relieve a lot of tension. And sometimes I'm just trying to relieve a little relieve a little tension while I'm trying to mutter through what you're very seriously talking about. So I have been accused of being insensitive and all the other things that the class clown gets accused of. I don't mean anything by it. It's just it's a character flaw.
Very cool. Josh Kaufman is back, and he said, what method would you recommend to bring out the best in people around you, professionally or with friends?
What methods? I think what you want to do is to tell people through words and example that there are better examples of humanity available to us than we sometimes aspire to become. And I think that it's very easy in life to move forward, hit a barrier, and then throw up your hands and say, I'm stuck here. One of the greatest gifts that my father ever gave me was, he taught me when you get to a barrier, you figure out how to either go around it. You might have to go over it. You may have to dig under it, and you may have to hit the barrier so hard that you blast right through it. Think like a fence or something. But you're going to get past the barrier. Some people are taught to just sit down and say, well, I'm done. This is as far as I'm ever going to go. But when you teach people that there are better examples of humanity that we can aspire to become, you can encourage them to see that what they are actually doing at this point right now helps all of us toward that end. And I think that if you can inspire people that way, you can get a lot more out of everybody, because I think ultimately we all want to be a little bit better.
Last question. What's next for Chris Fenwick?
I'm going to turn off the computer and spend the rest of the evening with my wife because that's more important than work. I learned that, and she taught me a lot of that, and I think that we all need to cherish the time that we have with our loved ones and our family.
Chris, I want to say thank you so much for being with me today. Thank you so much for being here. Lots going on for me personally, and I'm looking at my thanks, and I always start with my wife. And as I shared earlier, she's going through some things right now, and it's kind of tough. Special thanks, Kimberly Mobley, Ron Mobley, Global Family Friends, Alex Lindsay, Office Hour members, DVE Store, Liminal Entertainment Technologies, Byte High, Video 360, ApproveAlone.com, Cloud Bedrock LLC, Ken Jordan, Jonas Dattel, Aaron Husledge, Cherrick Cheetah, David Brady, Marcus Lee Folk, Richard Lavery, Chris Fenwick, Manolo Lozano, Jeffrey Powers, Bo Cordell, Mickey McAchore, Hazmat Geiger, Doug Moeller, Laura Thompson, Bryant Chan, Dennis Champion Walker, Roscoe Jones, George Butters, Joshua Minden, Conversation with Tony Mobley, producer, Clylock, Miguel Lopez Waterman. Thank you all so much for your help with Conversations with Tony Mobley. And Mr. Chris Fenwick, thank you so much for being here. A true professional. Thank you for your great work. And on next week, the fabulous Miss Daria Muss, singer-songwriter, is going to be on Conversations with Tony Mobley. I am amazed and happy that she will be with us next week. I want to thank everyone who is working behind the scenes with Conversation with Tony Mobley. And I want to let everyone know that we will continue to have great conversations with great people, and looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you all so much. Again, thank you, Chris Fenwick, for being an amazing guest. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight. Good night, everyone.